Are you listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other platform where you can leave a rate or review? Do you like what we're doing? If the answer to all of that is yes, please consider quickly giving us a 5-star rate. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a nice review, we greatly appreciate that as well. Okay, let's do this.
Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 286 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 14 of A Dance with Dragons, which is Tyrion 4.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, unless, of course, you have a Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tier that includes spoilers. Well, then we are going to spoil things for you, but regardless, hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened. Oh, by the way, I mean, if you're in those upper tiers but you don't want the spoilers, you can just skip over it.
Well,
you don't have to listen.
I provide those upper tiers with both options, spoiler included.
They have both options. Oh, so they don't even have to skip it. They can just choose the other one.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters and geography of this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. I'm glad you have some stuff in witty banter, because I didn't really have any interesting stories this week.
It's not very strong stuff, but it might pass muster. I went to see a local band who are called Leadfoot, and they have many members in common with a band that I've mentioned before here on the pod, whose name is Lie Heavy. These are the guys who look like it's open mic night at Last Half. Like
I like the visualization
every one of them is 200 pounds, long hair, huge beards, and they just look like they've just jumped off a longship, basically.
Right. They should have a giant with broken chains on their.
That would be perfect. Yeah. No, but they're a lot of fun. They're noisy and raucous.
All right, that's good. Although they do say if it's too loud, you're getting too old, and these days I often feel like live music is too loud. So
oh man, I mean, without the earplugs, I couldn't even go in the door. I mean, I have to wear earplugs. It's just much too much.
For sure. When I went to see my nephew's live tour a couple years ago. He saved, a section for family in the very front that happened to be right next to an absolutely enormous speaker. Ooh. And it was so painfully loud that I think I had hearing issues for at least a day or so afterward. And I wish I had brought earplugs. It never even crossed my mind. It was just, just didn't.
To all our young listeners, make sure you use earplugs at concerts. It's not worth it.
Oh yeah.
You're what I'm discovering more and more with time is that you're old for a long part of your life.
True. Yeah. If you're lucky.
Yeah. Well, you're going to feel old for a long time of your life. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So my other story from this week, well, it's not from this week actually. It was from a couple of weeks ago. When Carson and I went to the beach, we went to the aquarium at the beach, and Carson had bought season passes because it's all part of this environmental education she's doing. We have to go to all these things. So she got these season passes so we could go.
Cool.
So they sent her an email, and the email sort of was like, these are your passes, just show them when you come here. And so we went to the counter, and the lady working behind the counter was, I'm going to guess, 20 years of age. And Carson has quite a large phone, as do I, and she has the font set to old lady, shall
like
we call
the E at the top of the eye chart.
Yes, you've got it exactly. And she showed the lady the phone, and the lady said, "Is that a screenshot?" She could not believe that someone could operate a phone with a font that large. So
is that even possible? Oh, that's good. Yeah, well, what do you do? There's my eyesight hung in for a long time until about my late 40s. And now I was wearing my Apple Watch. It was the end of the day, just a little bit ago. I took it off, to put it away, and I was looking at the. There's 3 rings. It's move, exercise, and stand. And move is basically how many calories you've burned. Exercise is how long. I looked at it to see how I did at the end of the day. I couldn't read any of the information on it. I had to get my readers to be like, oh, okay, I did pretty well. Oh, so yeah.
The other thing that won't mean much to most of our listeners is that the Carolina Hurricanes won the first round of their playoffs.
Oh, they did. Yes.
They're into the second round sooner than anybody else. We're going to have a nice long break, get our feet up.
Yeah.
And they won in dramatic style.
Double overtime, right?
Double overtime after letting New Jersey take a 3-0 lead.
Wow. They
managed to claw their way back.
Good.
It was very thrilling. I am
Happy
very tired because I stayed up late.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When hockey playoffs go into overtime, it can really the hours can go by.
Yeah. I remember during the pandemic season there was a quintuple overtime, and I happened to watch the entire game. And I mean, it was like 3 a.m. And the funny thing about that was because it was in the pandemic season, they played all of the playoffs in one stadium, basically, or 2 stadia.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah,
I remember.
And the Hurricanes were due to play on that ice later that evening, but the quintuple overtime game took their time slot, and eventually they sent them home. They said, forget it, come back tomorrow, we'll play your game tomorrow.
Yeah, we already played your game for you.
Exactly, yeah, we played your game and it went to double overtime.
Yeah, there's some really long ones. I've been a spectator of some 4 overtime, 5 overtime Penguins playoffs, and it's exhausting, especially when you lose. When you win, it feels entirely worth it,
Oh, heck yeah. For sure.
When you lose, it feels pretty miserable.
Anyway. The Canes game actually was, the overtime was very one-sided. The Canes were just onslaught, and the Devils goalkeeper was playing fantastically well to keep them out, and it just had all the hallmarks of them sliding up the other end and stealing it.
Yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes. All the momentum going one way until in 1 second it's not.
Yeah, and actually it nearly happened right at the end of the first overtime. They took a shot and the goalie had dropped his stick, and he actually used his stick hand to save it. And I didn't realize this, but that's bare palm. He bare palmed this shot.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, that's going to sting right there.
And now he's got 3 broken fingernails. Exactly. Now he's got 3 broken fingers.
And he's the backup goalie. We can't afford to lose another one.
Well, this weekend is our last weekend as empty nesters for the summer. Can you believe it? Yeah, Molly's
the fledglings come home.
Yes, Molly's first school year ends. I think her last final is next Tuesday or Wednesday, and she'll be home.
God, that seems like 5 minutes since she left.
Tell me about it.
That's crazy.
It's been a full school year, though. It goes by.
Crazy.
I'm excited to have her back in the fold for a few months.
Well, say hi to her from me.
Will do.
All right, well, let's get down to business. How did we leave Tyrion Lannister? The last we saw of Tyrion, he and Illyrio Mopatis had finished their journey to meet up with Tyrion's new travelling companions. Illyrio names Tyrion Yollo, but Tyrion says his actual name is Hugo Hill, a bastard from Lannisport. Illyrio seems sad that he wouldn't get to see Griff's son, aptly named Young Griff. Tyrion met the rest of the group when he arrived at the Little Royne. Their leader, Griff, met with Tyrion in private. He distrusted Tyrion, and Tyrion thought Griff had secrets, a sellsword who could read. Tyrion swore to serve Daenerys loyally, but questioned whether the claims of dragons might be false, and as I recall, Griff did not like this accusation.
No, he did not.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we get a summary of this one?
All right. Tyrion lies awake in his makeshift sleeping quarters atop the cabin roof of the Shy Maid. He desperately wants wine, but due to him overindulging on his first night with the group, Griff has installed a no-wine policy when it comes to Tyrion. He also needs to bathe, but he fears losing a limb from the huge turtles that populate the Royne.
Tyrion rises and finds Griff in the cabin. The sellsword always takes the night watch alone and retires to his cabin when the sun rises. Griff reminds Tyrion of Bronn, but without Bronn's black humour, or, to be honest, anyone's any colour humour.
Right.
Griff takes his leave as Septa Lemore emerges on deck. She greets Tyrion, or Hugo, and questions how he slept. He admits he dreamed of her again. She assumes it was wicked dream from a wicked man.
Lemore doesn't share Tyrion's fear of the turtles. She walks to the prow of the boat, disrobes, and slips into the water. Tyrion can't help but admire the view while fantasizing about having relations with her. He determines the Septa has secrets, as she has stretch marks clearly from giving birth.
Tyrion shares a breakfast of biscuits and bacon with more of the companions who have recently awoken. He tells Yandri that the tales of the breadth of the Rhoyne were exaggerated. Several rivers in Westeros are wider and the Blackwater is deeper. Yandri says to wait and see. Young Griff emerges on deck and Tyrion takes stock of the boy. He is handsome enough to win the heart of any maid in Westeros, blue hair or no. His eyes are blue like his father's, but darker and run to purple depending on the light.
After breakfast, Duck and Young Griff suit up for arms training. Sir Duck's strength can overpower Young Griff with the long axe, but today's battle is with swords, much more even. Young Griff ultimately bests Duck with the sword and knocks the big man into the river. When Duck climbs back onto the boat, he tosses Tyrion in, and Tyrion shows his swimming abilities. He creates a backstory for his alias Hugor Hill. He learned to swim from the mummers troupe he traveled with. He enjoys rounding out Hugor with details that he's created.
Griff has tasked Tyrion with writing down all that he can about dragon lore. Tyrion has taken the assignment seriously, but he lacks the necessary resources to provide a well-fleshed-out account. Tyrion is working on that task when Haldon the Half-Maester interrupts and invites him to attend Young Griff's lessons. They start with languages. Young Griff is fluent in the Common Tongue, High Valyrian, and the dialects of Pentos, Tyrosh, Mere, and Lys. Next is geometry, where Young Griff struggles a bit more. Finally, they turn to history. Young Griff gives Tyrion a rundown of Volantine political history.
When the lessons end and Young Griff leaves, Tyrion and Haldon break out the cyvasse table. As they set up the board, Tyrion comments that Young Griff is bright, and his education is quite comprehensive for a sellsword son. Tyrion then asks about the pirates that are so feared and discussed. Haldon explains that the area between Arnoi and the Sorrows are lawless lands and crawling with pirates, although they should be safe enough, as boats heading south rarely have any worthy plunder.
As the cyvasse game begins, Tyrion goads Haldon into accepting a bet. As he has no money, he'll play the Half-Maester for secrets. Haldon confidently agrees, stating that the day Hugo beats him at cyvasse, turtles will crawl out of his bum. 3 hours later, Tyrion climbs onto the deck. Duck asks where Haldon is, and Tyrion says that the man has taken to his bed in pain. Turtles are crawling out of his bum.
Tyrion and Lemore discuss the storm ahead, both literal and figurative. While they talk, a ruined city rises around them. At the center is the remains of a huge palace. Tyrion realizes this is Nigh Sar, and the palace is that of Princess Nymeria herself. Here also, another river, nearly as large, converges with the Rhoyne. The added water flow spreads the breadth of the Rhoyne to an unimaginable width.
Tyrion says that no river in Westeros is near as wide. Yandri says it's just the start. Mother Rhoyne will only get wider as she gathers in her daughters. Just then, a gigantic turtle bursts from the water, so huge that it is larger than the boat itself. The turtle lets out a roar louder than a war horn. Tyrion's companions begin to hoot and holler. Ysilla has tears streaming down her face. "We're blessed," she says over and over again. Yandri calls the turtle the Old Man of the River. Tyrion is not surprised. Gods and wonders always appear to attend the birth of kings.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. We will definitely get to that last line because it seems totally out of left field based on what we got in the chapter. The information we got in the chapter.
Yes, and it is funny, you've put in the notes here that there's not a lot of plot advancement until that point, and that's very true. I mean, like, nothing's going on. In fact, I struggled when I first read the chapter to understand how they could swim and not be left behind by the boat, but then I realized they weren't even moving.
Right.
I mean, literally making no progress here at all, because they don't move at night, because the Rhine can be too shallow and they could ground the boat, so they drop anchor at night.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to meet the new cast and learn about life on and around the Rhine. And, a chapter like that is needed from time to time. It can't be all action and plot advancements. To build a world, you have to build the world that George Martin wants to build. You also need to build characters that we care about, and you need to create depth in both the world and the characters. And this gave us an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, that's a good point to raise, actually, because I've been, for the last book and a half, I've been getting impatient with the book and wanted it to move along quicker. But you're absolutely right. The book wouldn't be the same without Yandri and Ysilla,
Right, yeah.
And what they give to Young Griff's character, because they're just small parts. So Yandri and Ysilla are the boat owners, right? They own the boat. She cooks the breakfast, and she keeps all the others at bay from the breakfast except Young Griff.
Right.
She makes sure he's fed.
She shoves the food in his hands and smacks everyone else for getting near it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's a good cast of characters, really. We'll get into them.
Mm-hmm. So Tyrion is finally detoxing after a long. I mean, like, he's been on a bender for quite a while now, but. Right. Griff has put the kibosh on that, and that's probably to Tyrion's benefit. You can't keep going like that.
Yeah, he mentions to us that there's days and nights of shaking and sweats, and I mean, I have no personal firsthand experience with it, but I understand that detoxing from alcohol is a very unpleasant experience, and I wondered.
Let me help you here, Mackelly. Don't.
Right. That's the plan anyway.
That's the fun. I am not going to find out.
Yes. I just, if we've been with him. I mean, ever since he got on the ship to go across the narrow sea, he's basically been nearly drinking himself to death. And, so that he's got a lot of detoxing to do here. And until the worst is past, I'm just not sure how well he'd even be able to function.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, he's a sharp guy, but you can't be sharp with that kind of alcohol intake that he's doing. He would be no use to Daenerys if he carried on. So Griff is actually helping him, even though Tyrion doesn't appreciate it.
He might even be saving his life, possibly, if he, by preventing him from drinking.
Yeah. So Septa Lemore, she's quite the character. She accuses Tyrion of wickedness, but with a playful air.
Yes.
And she is not the Shy Maid of the boat. That's for sure.
Septa with a sense of humor for body jokes and no shyness about nudity is it certainly doesn't make you think of Septa Mordane, who I don't think would tolerate either of those two options or any of the other Septas we've met. Tyrion makes this joke. Well, they kind of... Lemore kind of sets him up. She says, hey, did you see the turtle? I know you only get up this early to watch the turtles. And he says, well, that's true. Nothing delights me more than a pair of shapely shells. And, they both get a good laugh out of that. And, that's, again, not something you would expect out of the typical Septa that we've met thus far anyway. So,
yeah. And sort of like the sort of sense of colouring in the characters, I think, is also given something just by another single sentence here where Yandri is going about his business of getting the boat ready to move off, but he's glancing over too to see Lemore because she's an attractive lady who doesn't mind being naked.
Yeah, but Tyrion does mention that she's got secrets because he notices, like we mentioned in the summary, that she has stretch marks from childbirth, and he's he is content with her having her secrets and him not knowing what the truth is. But I personally wondered, possibly some sort of tragedy befell her and caused her to turn to the church for solace or purpose.
Do we have a physical description of her, particularly hair and eyes, I'm thinking?
I believe blonde hair. I can't recall eye color. Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, maybe she was married, had a husband and children, and, something happened to the husband and the children. And,
I'll say, I think I voiced this last time during spoilers, but maybe it was in the regular episode. She does seem like she would be about the right age to be young Griff's mother.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, because he describes her in her 40s.
She's north of 40, right?
Yeah, right,
and young Griff is 15, something like that.
Right, yeah.
That puts her at 26 when she had him, something like that.
Yeah, that fits, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, why would a Septa hang around with this child? What is her connection to it?
This group
that
entirely,
would be one connection,
right? It's not even just young Griff; it's the group entirely. Why would she be here with this group?
True. You can imagine, though, that both Ysilla, Yandri, and Griff, if it's Griff's son, Griff has a reason to hang around with young Griff. But if young Griff is just a charge, they're all people who would be paid to do something. Similarly, Doug, and maybe Haldon as well. But a Septa is somewhat different. She would have some kind of vocational calling to do something, perhaps.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Well, she definitely has her secrets. Maybe we'll discover what they are in time.
Yeah. So we learned that Yandri and Ysilla look Rhoynish, but actually they speak the common tongue because they are from Westeros. They are two typical examples of the orphans of the Green Blood who've come back home to the Mother Rhoyne. Yes,
we discussed last time, I believe, what Tyrion mentions that they have a Rhoynar look, and we questioned, the Rhoynar were either for the most part, either killed or left with Nymeria and went to Dorne, and now we learn why, because they were in Dorne and they came back to their homeland.
Right.
And there's, like I was saying at the beginning of our discussion here, we weren't just getting information about the characters. We were getting information about the Rhoyne and this part of Essos. And one thing we learned is that the area between the Sorrows and Arnoi is a lawless zone. And I thought that was a pretty cool fact there, that it makes some sense. I think it's Yandri that kind of explains it. He says that area between Arnoi and the Sorrows is pirate infested because north of Arnoi, Qohor polices the river, and Arnoi is a ruin on the Coin River.
Yeah.
And that's the second daughter that the Rhoyne will pick up along the way. The Darkling daughter, I believe, from the debris from the forest of Qohor. Qohor is the nearest free city, which is why they police that area of the river. And then between the Sorrows and Arnoi, you've got Dagger Lake, which, although it's called Dagger Lake, it's not actually a lake. It's kind of the section of the Rhoyne where it broadens out a good bit after the Coin merges in. Yeah.
One thing that's interesting about that, though, is that they're on the branch, which is the Rhoyne, not the Coin, right?
Right. Yes.
So where they are when they see the giant turtle, they're in Nysar.
Yeah.
And Nysar is about as northerly as Arnoy.
Right.
So I'm surprised that they don't say the stretch of the river between the
Yes.
Sorrows and Nysar
Right.
rather than
That's true. I guess because Arnoy is closer to Cohor, even though it's not actually on the Rhoyne. So yeah, you're right. It would make more sense to say Nysar to the Sorrows.
right, which again would be roughly the same. I mean, basically think of a Y-shaped river here with
Yep.
with Nysar and Arnoy as the two tips, not tips, but points along the V part of the Y,
Right.
and the Sorrows being down at the base of the Y. So yeah, but it is a big stretch of river for sure. But then the other thing that they're saying is that trade flows mostly in the other direction. So heading south, you're less vulnerable to pirates. And
Right.
I thought about that a little bit. And I was like, well, why wouldn't you just attack everyone? But I guess there's a lot of risk, you know. Who
Yeah.
knows how well defended these boats are?
Right.
So you bide your time and you go for the bigger targets, I guess.
Yeah, you go for the targets that are coming back home. Although where they're coming back home to, there's not a lot of options here to for
That
home.
is one thing. That is one thing. I mean, I think that's part of it. This far north, they're not really worried about. The only thing they were really worried about was sort of slave catchers was what they might find
Right.
this far north.
Yeah.
But it feels like you're right. There's not. I guess there's Norvos and Quohor. Both of those must
Yeah.
have river trade.
Sure.
So things
yeah.
come up the river, but it does feel like it's not the most populous part of the world. So
No, definitely not.
yeah.
Yeah. But we've heard of the Sorrows before. It was actually last chapter. That was where the late stage grayscale, those afflicted with grayscale, congregate. So that's definitely a place you want to get through quickly and carefully. So
And also makes a certain amount of sense that that would be a sort of demarcation of the lawless zone, because whatever's south of the Sorrows, you might actually want to sort of police the river from that point to make sure that those grayscale zombies don't come for you.
well, yes, that's true.
Just a
Yeah.
thought.
So at the end of the chapter, while we're talking about the geography of the river here, we might as well lump it all together. At the end of the chapter, they're passing through Nysar, which is a huge, ruined, Rhoynish city, and Tyrion sees the palace of Nymeria, and it appears to be at the confluence of the Rhoyne and the Noy. The Rhoyne and the Noyne. And, this is where, here at Nysar and in this palace, is where Nymeria decided to gather the Rhoynar into 10,000 ships and sail eventually to Dorne, rather than see her people enslaved by the Valyrian freehold.
Oh, I was going to ask a question there. Did they sail down the Rhine and then out into the ocean and then across the ocean?
That's how I
across the
understand
narrow
it.
sea.
Yes.
I don't understand boats very well, but I would have thought your specifications for a rowing boat would
Yeah.
not be the same as that for an ocean-going boat.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it really does. I thought, well, they're sailing 10,000 ships down the Rhoyne, basically through Volantis to get out into the sea. Volantis is the first daughter of the Valyrian freehold. How did they get past the Volantines?
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
How powerful was Volantis in those days? Because from Young Griff's description of Volantis's sort of political history, it felt like that it ebbed and flowed a little bit and wasn't that strong until fairly recently. That's how I felt. But and Nymeria is pretty ancient, right? I mean, that was
but they were, Volantis was originally, I think we got this from a background, an outpost of the Valyrian freehold. So it depends on when exactly, but I think they were the strongest of the daughters of the Valyrian freehold. The free cities and such. So,
but then again, what do? You see 10,000 ships hovering into view. You're like, oh, you know what we should have done? We should have built a chain across this thing.
Where's Tyrion when we need him?
Oh yeah, wait a minute. It's 6 miles wide at this point, so we can't do that either.
Well, true, yeah. Tyrion notices that a near twin river, nearly the same size as the Rhoyne, the daughter Noin, is converging right here. Yes,
confluencing.
Yes. And after the confluence, the river that they combine into is still called the Rhoyne, and that is usual naming convention. When there's a confluence of rivers, the larger of the two rivers continues the name forward, just kind of like the Red Fork and the Tumblestone in Westeros. When they come together, it becomes the Red Fork.
Yeah. Why do I feel like a Pittsburgh reference is coming?
because you know me so well. The confluence in Pittsburgh is unique. As the Allegheny and the Monongahela merge, they make a third river, the Ohio. Technically, it should be the Allegheny, as the Allegheny is larger than the Mon. Okay. So, it's a unique situation there.
Yeah, I remember I saw the Ohio River for the first time when I went to the eclipse last year, and I could not believe the size of that river as far from the ocean as we were.
Oh, yeah.
Boggled my mind, because I'm from England, and England, if you stand in the middle of England, far from the sea as possible, you're less than 100 miles from the sea.
Right,
so
that makes sense.
Any river, any water that falls has got 100 miles at most before it hits the sea.
Yeah.
We cannot develop rivers like that. The Ohio River is astonishingly big.
Yeah, and it's not as big as the Mississippi, which must be absolutely
The Mississippi still
enormous.
Blows my mind. I remember reading that in 1927 the Mississippi flooded, and it flooded an area the size of Scotland.
I think you've told us this before, maybe. It sounds familiar.
That's a country.
I know.
That is a country was flooded by one river.
Wow. Yeah,
Amazing.
That's impressive. Tyrion, upon seeing the new river after the Noin and the Rhoyne converge on each other, he retracts his opinion that the Rhoyne was smaller than many of the Westerosi rivers, and Yandri says, "You've seen nothing yet. There's still 4 more major tributaries to go, and when we get to its widest point, you can't see the shore on either side." So I don't know how that would compare to the Mississippi. I've never been on the Mississippi, so I don't know if you can see the shore from either side in the center of it. But the Rhoyne's going to be pretty big, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, because we're here with this giant river, and we're still, estimating 500 miles of this to go, plus all these extra rivers coming in to it.
Yeah.
It's going to be an enormous body of water by the time it gets there.
Yeah.
So we're curious about the education that Young Griff is receiving. I mean, it is substantial. Skill at arms, languages, geography, geometry. I mean, he's being trained to be quite the person. I mean,
right.
I think Tyrion just compares him to the Lords of Westeros, but the Lords of Westeros that I know are not a patch on Young Griff. I mean, they can't speak foreign languages. They can't read and write, half of them.
That's true, yeah. It feels like each companion here on this boat brings a training skill for Young Griff.
Yes, because Duck fights him, Haldon teaches him, Lemore is giving him religious education.
Right, yeah. So
and Griff for jokes.
That's right. Griff provides the nightly stand-up comedy. But again, we've discussed it so many times. This random collection of people, were they chosen for this purpose, or was this a random occurrence? you know?
Yeah. And the more you spend time with them, the more you see how it revolves around young Griff, how he's the object
Yeah.
of whatever they're doing. They
Yeah.
are here for young Griff one way or another.
Yeah, it's unclear if it's just because he's the only child in the group and so they all feel a bit of ownership toward him, or
Right. You could see that, but the more you spend time with them, the more it feels like it's more than that. It feels like we are here.
Right.
I'm not on this boat, and I happen to know a bunch of stuff, so I'm going to teach the young kid to kill the time. I'm on this boat to teach that child. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. And as Tyrion comments, why such an effort to train the son of a sellsword? And like what you were just saying right there, plus Illyrio's fondness of him, it really makes you wonder if more is going on than what meets the eye. He seems like a good kid, but they're taking exorbitant measures here.
Right. I've met plenty of good kids in my life who I have promptly forgotten and ignored.
Yeah. Well, and then it comes back, possibly Illyrio's son or grandson, which we keep throwing out there as a possibility. And I remind you that Tyrion in this chapter is wearing child's clothing that came from Illyrio, musty clothing at that. Could that be could there be a correlation there as well?
Yeah.
So
if Griff says, "Remember those trousers," then we'll know we're onto something.
Right. Yeah, if the tag on the back has YG written in it. But they seem like a good, cohesive group, even if Griff is a little gruff.
Yeah, for sure.
They remind me a bit of Ariane Martell's traveling group. I hope that this ends better than it did for that group.
Perhaps a little more cautious and thoughtful than those numbskulls.
Well, that's true. That is, you make a solid point there. They were kind of just out for a joyride, most of them.
We get quite a bit of dragon lore as Tyrion recounts what he's trying to write down for. Is it Haldon or Griff who wants him to write down?
I think it was Griff.
I think it's Griff too, yeah. Tyrion knows a lot. Tyrion has had a bit of a sort of childhood obsession with dragons, so he's read a lot of things. He's quite the expert. He'd like to get his hands on some documentation to help him remember some things. He recounts various texts that have been lost that he hopes he might find. One of which he thinks he might find in Volantis, but one of which is the one that was written by the hand of the king
Septon Barth. Yeah,
Septon Barth. That's the one he doesn't think he'll ever find because the subsequent king, help me out.
Baelor the Blessed had them.
Baelor the Blessed wanted all of Septon Barth's writings burned, so that one is going to be hard to find for sure.
Yeah, and we had suggested, I think it was must have been Tyrion 1 of this book. We suggested this as a useful role that Tyrion could play for Dany because of his research and interest in dragons.
Did you notice a little self-promotion by our friend George Martin? One of the books he advertises as being something that should be read is called Fire and Blood. Not written by George Martin, but happens to share a name with a book written by George Martin.
Tyrion is as unlikely to find blood and fire. So the name of the book in the chapter is Blood and Fire. It's
inverted.
Yes. And he refers to it as the blood-soaked book, sometimes called The Death of Dragons, and that there's only one surviving copy that's locked away in the Citadel. But Blood and Fire is also the working title to the sequel that George Martin is writing to Fire and Blood.
Oh, I see.
Yes,
we may have a second copy one of these days.
Right, that's right. The Fire and Blood is the first volume of the Targaryen history, which includes the Dance of the Dragons. Blood and Fire is supposed to be the name of the second part of the it would be the sequel, but the second volume. That's what I'm trying to say. The second volume.
Yeah.
But he said he's thinking about the mating habits, and he's trying to put together his what information he can about the mating habits of dragons. And he thinks that, to us, he thinks that Barth and Munkin and Thomax disagree on the mating habits.
Right.
And Aemon Targaryen, as he was dying, he told Sam, Barth had it right. Dragons are neither male nor female, but they can change their sex as needed, when he was referring to Dany being the prince that was promised, that it was the wording, the prince that was promised, but it doesn't have to be a male prince, because dragons have to have a specific gender. So,
yeah,
so we get a little bit of that thrown back in here, I guess.
Yeah. And honestly, emulating the podcast, Haldon gets young Griff to provide background on Volantene politics, which is quite interesting. So they have the 3 triarchs, and there's been sort of like a long battle between sort of the more military martial arm of Volantis and the sort of trade arm. And in recent centuries, I mean, things are measured in longer times here, but the trade arm became the stronger of the two, and now 2 of the 3 triarchs are always from the group known as the elephants. It's the elephants and the tigers, right?
Yes.
And the elephants are the trade and tigers are the military. And so 2 of the 3 are always elephants.
Yes, and it all began after the doom of Valyria, when the Volantis, not when the Volantis, but when Volantis, as the oldest and strongest child of Valyria, felt that it was their right to fill the power vacuum left by the Valyrian freehold. And like you said, there was the 2 trains of thought. One thought the Tigers, who you're saying is the military branch, which are the older houses, because this was originally a military outpost.
Outpost, right.
Yeah. They thought that the rules should be through power and military strength. The merchants, the new money, the elephants, thought it should be through trade and peace. Initially, the older powers won, and they took Myr and Lys, and they held it for a couple generations, but then they tried to reach for Tyrosh, and that began what we've talked about in other backgrounds, I'm sure, the Century of Blood, which was kind of the power struggle for in Essos after the Doom.
Yeah.
And other cities joined the fight, including, well, this is not a city, but Aegon the Conqueror and Balerion flew to the aid of the free cities from Dragonstone, and even Argilac Durandon from the Storm King at the time, because this all happened prior to Aegon conquering Westeros.
Okay, yeah, all right.
So there were still Storm Kings at Storm's End.
Right.
The fighting lasted about 100 years, I think Young Griff tells us here, and the Volantines were left broken and bankrupt and depopulated, and ever since then, which is now more than 300 years, the elephants have always had 2 out of the 3 triarch seats, if not a full sweep of the seats.
Yeah.
And we met one of those elephant riding triarchs when we were with Quinta Martell in Volantis.
Yeah. Who, for some reason, then I was wanting to call Young Griff, but it's a different young Westerosi man wandering around Essos. That's right. So the old man of the river, this giant turtle, blesses them. And Tyrion thinks to himself, and we're going to quote here, "Of course he did. Gods and wonders always appear to attend the birth of kings."
Yeah.
So we don't have much context for why he would suddenly think that. But the interesting precursor to that was the game of cyvasse between Tyrion and Haldon.
Right.
Where Tyrion had consistently lost at cyvasse to Haldon, to the point where Haldon was very confident that he was going to win again.
Indeed.
And Tyrion wanted to make a bet of it, but Tyrion has nothing, so he wants to play for secrets. And then Tyrion won at cyvasse. Now, we never got to hear whether or not he heard any secrets, but the very next thing that happens is they see the old man of the river, and Tyrion thinks this thought.
Right. It definitely feels like it's related in some way.
I
feel like the whole point of this chapter was to build toward that line, which I've always maintained, the last sentence, or at least somewhere in the last paragraph, is a very important line of the sentence.
It is called
chapter.
The Mackelly hypothesis. The last line matters.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's been no reference to a new king only going to meet the queen, but,
Well, I mean, okay, I'm going to throw out something obvious. Are they grooming Griff to marry Daenerys?
Right.
I mean, that would make him a king.
Yes.
And it feels like he's getting the education a king, well, I would say must have, but then I do remember one Joffrey.
Right. Should have, maybe?
Should have, let's say, yes.
Yes, exactly. But on what grounds could they marry the son of a sellsword to Daenerys Targaryen,
Well, the other thing that you mentioned in the summary was that his eyes are blue and a dark blue, which in certain lights look a little bit purple, which gives you the sense that maybe he's got this old Valyrian blood in him somewhere.
Could be, yeah. He definitely could be more than he appears. It certainly seems like there's more going on than what appears. And Tyrion's incognito. Why not young Griff, I guess?
Yeah. All right. Next up is some spoilers. You have to join us at the upper tiers of the Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer levels to get the spoilers, but they're always worth listening to, so highly recommended. All right. Thank you for the spoilers. Always fascinating. Do you have some background for us? Are you just going to regurgitate what young Griff said?
That's right. Let me tell you about Volantine political history. Well, actually, you brought it up earlier. You brought Septon Barth up just a little bit ago. And I'm going to mention Septon Barth. So Tyrion, as we've mentioned, has been tasked with putting everything he knows and can gather about dragons on parchment. Unfortunately, the source material at hand is lacking, and he wishes he had access to some of the leading works on the subject. As you mentioned, one such work is Septon Barth's Dragons, Worms, and Wyverns, Their Unnatural History. Tyrion tells us that Barth was born a blacksmith's son who rose to be hand of the king for King Jaehaerys I, and that Baelor the Blessed had Barth's writings destroyed when Baelor sat the Iron Throne, which is something you also mentioned. And that's pretty intriguing stuff. So who was this guy? Well, I'm about to tell you. As we know, he was born a peasant, and he was given to the faith at a young age, eventually becoming a Septon, and initially he served at Highgarden. He rose to prominence with the Tyrells and was sent to King's Landing for further studies. And within 4 years in King's Landing, he'd become one of King Jaehaerys' closest advisors, and some say his closest friend. When the High Septon died, King Jaehaerys considered using some influence to persuade the most devout to elect Barth as the new High Septon. However, Barth asked him not to interfere, please. And when Daemon Valerian resigned as Hand of the King, Jaehaerys considered his friend for the job, but thought better of it, as Barth was still very loyal to the faith. Despite not being Hand of the King, Barth was instrumental in the creation of King Jaehaerys' Great Code, which was the first unified code of law in the Seven Kingdoms. Also, when King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne's niece, or Princess Arrea Targaryen, returned from being missing for more than a year, she arrived completely unrecognizable, emaciated, skin burned, and with things moving beneath her skin. Barth and Maester Bennifer tended to her. Her skin was burning up, so they put her in an ice bath, and Barth recounts slimy, vile creatures spilling forth into the water, some as long as his arm. It's believed that she and Balerion had traveled to Valyria, and when she was there, she was infected by these creatures. It was this experience with Arrea that led Barth to his research that culminated in the book that Tyrion seeks. As we know, Barth did eventually become Hand of the King to Jaehaerys. He served in that capacity for 41 mostly peaceful years. The man was considered brilliant but humble, and Archmaester Gildain called him the wisest man ever to serve as Hand of the King.
Do I remember correctly that Arrea Targaryen did not survive that incident?
She did not survive.
I thought that's meant
She showed up in the morning, and I think by afternoon she had died, despite their best efforts. Yeah.
So, comparison with television show, just like the last Tyrion chapter, basically, there's nothing to compare. This whole part of Tyrion's journey was dropped, which is interesting, because I always think that George Martin's most important threads would have been maintained. So is Young Griff not that important of a thread to the overall story because it wasn't in the TV show? Or was it just like, let's simplify, even though this is the most important thread for George? And actually, then also from George's perspective, the people falling out of love with the game, with Game of Thrones as it went on, George Martin might learn lessons. I've thought this several times, that he might learn lessons from the reaction to the TV show.
Yeah, for sure.
And so in his mind, he was thinking the Young Griff would actually end up being a dead end, and so it could be dropped from the TV show. They dropped it from the TV show. Nobody liked how the TV show ended. Let's bring Young Griff back to life and give him more of a story as time goes on.
Yeah, that could be.
Just a thought.
Yeah, makes sense.
Pedantry Corner. I don't have anything for Pedantry Corner, but I will say for quite a long time I was like, why are they jumping off this boat? Why don't they get left behind by this stupid boat? It was quite clear, but it was also slightly confusing, It just feels like if you're on a river, just let the boat slide down the river. But they were saying there are rocks and shallows and it's dangerous.
Yes, especially I guess up at this part. Probably as it gets... as it picks up as the mother Royne picks up her daughters, maybe it gets deeper and certainly wider.
I was going to say, I would think this river would be pretty flipping deep now that if it's that wide, it's going to be deep.
It's got to. At least deep enough for this boat to be able to sail comfortably
exactly.
down
They
the
say it's got
center.
a very shallow keel, so yeah.
Right, yeah.
News and notes. We don't really have anything to report this time. I did think as we were going through sort of building the notes for this, and when I say we building the notes, you did most of the work. You did almost all the work this week, so thank you, Mackelly. We actually jumped ahead. The last Tyrion chapter, I obsessed about the Royne and talked all about it. And then this chapter was all about the Royne. I was like, oh, I should have saved that up for this one.
Well, we'll just copy and paste.
Yeah.
Put it in this one.
But I guess physical descriptions of territory is not a big spoiler to the plot, but
no.
We did jump ahead.
Yeah, it's fine. It's all good. And, not only do we not have news this week, we also don't have a review to read this week, sadly. A little teary emoji. So hey, those of you listening out there, if you consider going out and leaving us a 5-star rating and a positive review, we will read it right here, right now where I'm talking in a future episode when you write it. So please do. It really helps us out a great deal, and we very much appreciate it.
All right, well, let's conclude this one. Not a lot of forward momentum for Tyrion or the boat that he's on, to be honest. But a nice meet and greet for his new friends.
Yes, it was a good opportunity to get to know these folks. Of course, we could have met them while they were traveling down the Royne more steadily, I guess. But
fighting off stone men and pirates.
Right. But, there might not have been forward movement, but we did have the odd exclamation at the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
And, did Tyrion learn something?
Brewing.
Yeah, did he learn
There's
from
a plot.
Haldon? Yeah, right, yeah. For some reason, we checked in during this uneventful time here on the Royne. We could have checked in with Tyrion later on when something more useful was happening, but we checked in right here when the old man of the river turtle blessed them and Tyrion made that exclamation. It sounds like there's some reason why that was.
Yeah. It's the calm before the storm. They're heading into waters that are a lot more dangerous, I feel. So.
Yeah. Again, at the end of the chapter, Lemore and Tyrion are discussing the storm brewing in the distance, and it's brewing in the same direction that they're traveling in. And, it seems like a bit of a metaphor there.
Next week, we meet Davos Seaworth, who I keep thinking is dead. So I'm always relieved when I see a new Davos chapter hoving into view. So we'll look forward to that.
Absolutely.
There's 3 ways that you can help us out. You can leave us a positive review and a 5-star rating. We'll read them out. You could buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhall. There you can become a sustainer at any of the various levels. There's a tier to match your budget and interest, and the upper tiers get you optional access to the spoilers. Or you can donate directly to our cause through our website, ghostsofharrenhall.buzzsprout.com.
And if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, well, first off, you can send us a text. The link is at the top of every episode show notes. Just please keep in mind we have no means of responding back to you, but we do very much enjoy reading them. And if you're interested in keeping up on the latest Ghosts of Harrenhal news and developments, well, you could check us out on our social media. You can follow us on Twitter. I just posted a video today of, it was the most random thing. I was walking back from, I was at the mailbox or something. For some reason, I was at the top of my driveway. And this huge crow or raven, I don't know which, landed on one of the peaks of my roof and just started jibber-jabbering away. And I thought, if only I was a child of the forest, maybe I could understand what this message was that I was being given.
Did you mutter dark wings, dark words?
I tried not to think about that part. Anyway, you can follow us on Twitter at Ghost Harrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.